Julian Croft's 20 years of carefully constructed, patiently aged peace shattered the moment he saw a faded photograph on page 47 of a glossy auction house catalog, shattering just as easily as an old wine cork crumbles to dust. The photograph was of a 1982 Chateau Margaux from that legendary vintage, but for Julian this was not just a rare and priceless wine. This was a time capsule containing state secrets which he was supposed to deliver to an agent on a rainy street in Berlin 20 years ago, but which had vanished amidst the scent of blood and gunpowder. The tiny microfilm he had hidden with his own hands inside that bottle's cork held the greatest secrets of the clandestine intelligence organization known as the Cellar. And now, after 20 years of slumber, that bottle, that secret, that sealed past had surfaced, and Julian knew that it wouldn't just be collectors who were after it. It would be the most dangerous ghosts of the past as well. Julian's life was now rooted in this soil, these vineyards just outside Bordeaux. He was in his late 60s. His face was a map bearing the marks of the French sun and wind. His hands, calloused from the earth and the vines, were a craftsman's hands, yet they still retained the incredible sensitivity of their past. Every morning he would wake with the first light of day and walk among his vineyards while the dewdrops on the leaves had not yet evaporated. He would check the ripeness of the grapes, feel the moisture of the soil, and listen to the whispers of the vines. His life was calm, cyclical, and predictable, just like the earth's. It was the complete opposite of the world he had left behind 20 years ago. That world was one of the last remnants of the Cold War, of corporate espionage and of nameless, faceless powers fighting their wars in the shadows. A life lived in the luxury hotel rooms of Zurich, Geneva, and Monaco, on private jets, and in places where privacy was the most expensive commodity. In that life, Julian Croft was not just a master sommelier, he was also the most valuable, most trusted, and most invisible courier of the Cellar, a clandestine, non-governmental intelligence organization. His talent was unique. Julian was one of a handful of people in the world who could, with an undetectable skill, open the corks of the world's rarest, most valuable wine bottles, place small objects like microfilm inside, and then perfectly replicate the bottle's original wax seal and foil. He was not just a wine expert. He was an art forger, a master of micromechanics, and an artist of deception. A bottle of wine in his hands could turn into a weapon that could change the fate of a country or a fortune. For years he had used this dangerous talent in absolute secrecy, serving the highest bidder. Until that last job. Until that bloody ambush in Berlin. That night everything had gone wrong. He was supposed to deliver that critical microfilm containing the identities of all the agents in a deep-cover spy network in Eastern Europe known as Project Nightingale to a young female agent from the French DGSE. But they had been ambushed. The sound of gunshots, of breaking glass, and the sight of that young woman, Isabelle Rousseau, collapsing to the ground in a pool of blood. Julian had escaped from the midst of that chaos with the bottle, lucky to be alive, but his soul wounded. After that night, he had informed both the Cellar and the DGSE that the bottle had been destroyed in the crossfire and had vanished like a ghost. He had buried the bottle on the grounds of a now defunct, abandoned estate in England and built himself a new, quiet life. He was no longer a courier. He was a winemaker. He no longer carried secrets. He created secrets from the soil. This fragile piece came to an end with that glossy, thick auction catalog sent by mail by an old friend from the wine world, a wine merchant.
Julian, by the fireside, listening to the crackle of a log he had thrown into the fire, was turning the pages of the catalogue out of old habit. And then, on page 47, he saw it. Lot 247. A photograph. The ghost of that night 20 years ago. A 1982 Chateau Margaux. The bottle looked flawless, but when he read the description below it, his blood ran cold. Condition: excellent. Label: slightly damp. On the wax seal, there is a unique minor imperfection consistent with the period, which confirms the bottle's authenticity. That minor imperfection was Julian's signature. When he resealed the bottle, he would leave a tiny spiral mark on the wax, as small as a pinprick, a mark that only an expert would notice. This was his silent message to the seller, confirming that the job was done. Someone had dug up the grounds of that abandoned estate in England, found the bottle, and now, knowingly or unknowingly, had pulled the pin of a time bomb.
Julian's mind, like a machine waking from a 20-year slumber, began to work rapidly. This bottle was not just a bottle. It was a sword with 3 sharp edges. First, there were the identities of the agents in Project Nightingale. If these identities fell into the wrong hands, those people, who were still alive, would be hunted down one by one. Julian felt a responsibility towards them. Second, there was his former client, the ruthless intelligence broker known as the Vulture. The moment he learned that the bottle had surfaced, he would do anything to get the secret inside and sell it to the highest bidder. Third, there was the French government, that is, the DGSE. They too would be after their lost secret. And in the middle, at the intersection of all these forces, there was himself. His fear came true. Later that night, the encrypted communication device he had kept for emergencies, which had been silent for years, came to life with a crackling sound. A single message appeared on the screen. The cellar is open again. We expect a withdrawal. Signature: the Vulture. This was not an invitation, it was an order. The Vulture wanted him to get the bottle and bring it to him. As Julian was deleting the message, he saw a familiar face on the TV news bulletin. The newly appointed French Minister of Foreign Trade was visiting London for cultural and economic talks. This woman was none other than Isabelle Rousseau, whom he thought had died in Berlin that night, now in her late 40s, a powerful and confident stateswoman. She had not died, and now she too was in London. The game had begun. The auction house was the stage, and Julian, unwillingly, was the lead actor. Julian shed the identity of the calm, earthbound man of his vineyard like an old jacket. He had to become the master courier, the strategist who calculated every possibility once again. He set off for London, the city of surveillance and shadows, the world he thought he had left behind. His goal was not to steal the bottle, but a more elegant solution. He would participate in the auction, legally buy the bottle at any cost, and silence the secret inside forever. This was the cleanest, simplest solution, or so he thought. The pre-auction preview at the luxurious London auction house was like a silent battlefield where the world's richest and most powerful people had gathered. Julian, under a fake identity in the guise of a wine collector, blended into the crowd. And then, in front of the glass display case where the bottle was exhibited, he came face to face with his first ghost, the Vulture. He was older now, his hair had turned white, but his predatory carrion crow-like eyes had not changed at all. With him were dangerous-looking men who looked like Russian and Arab businessmen. The Vulture acted as if he hadn't noticed Julian, but the short, meaningful glance he gave him from the corner of his eye said it all. Get the bottle, or you die. Just as Julian was moving away from there and retreating to a quieter corner, he confronted his second ghost, Isabelle Rousseau. She was no longer that young, idealistic agent. She was the embodiment of power and authority. With her were serious-faced diplomats who were clearly from the French embassy. Mr. Croft,
Rousseau said, using Julian's fake name. Her voice was as cold and sharp as a polished piece of ice. "What a great surprise to see you here." This was not an introduction. It was an interrogation. Rousseau asked him what had happened in Berlin 20 years ago. Julian tried to explain that they had been ambushed, that he had seen her get shot, and that he had to escape, but there was not a shred of belief in Rousseau's eyes. "Our records are different," she said. "According to our records, a double agent, that is, you, ambushed both us and the other party and disappeared with the bottle." Rousseau told him to stay away from this auction, from that bottle, from this city. She made it clear that the French government considered that bottle a matter of national security and would get it at any cost.
In that moment, Julian realized how naive his simple plan was. This was not a war that could be won with money. On the one hand, there was the vulture's unlimited black money, and on the other, the power of a state, that is, France. He would be crushed in this bidding war, and worst of all, he would expose his identity. He could not win with brute force either. He was not a killer or a soldier. Events accelerated even faster that night. The vulture's men, getting impatient, attempted a robbery at the auction house at midnight. But this was exactly the move Rousseau had been expecting. The invisible security network around the auction house, that is, the DGSE agents Rousseau had placed, easily thwarted the robbery. This failed attempt made the situation even worse. The auction house was now a fortress, protected not just by private security, but also by British and French intelligence. Reaching the bottle was now impossible. In his hotel room, Julian, in desperation, was thinking about his next move. He could not win with brute force. He could not win with money. Then he had only one option left: to win with his own art, with that unique, unknown talent of his. And in his mind, that crazy, that impossible plan began to take shape. The only way to secure the secret was not to steal the bottle itself, but only the secret inside it. He would let someone else, that is Rousseau, win the bottle, and then, in that moment of triumphant intoxication, in front of everyone's eyes, without anyone noticing, he would swap that tiny, that priceless cork. This was not going to be a robbery. It was going to be a magic trick, and the stage was that high-security winner's lounge, and the audience were the two enemies who wanted to kill him. Julian's plan was as delicate and complex as a clockwork mechanism. First, he visited one of London's best antique wine merchants. From him, he bought a flawless cork from an ordinary wine from 1982, but one that had all the characteristics of the period. Then, in an art restoration workshop, after hours of work, he prepared an exact copy of the unique red wax seal and foil used on the Chateau Margaux bottles of that era. Now he had a replica cork and seal, indistinguishable from the original, but innocent, empty inside. The second stage of his plan was to infiltrate the stage. He knew that the auction house had a special, high-security lounge for customers who won the most valuable pieces, for an expert to verify the authenticity of the piece immediately after the sale. He would be that expert. Using his fake identity and his old reputation in the wine world, he convinced the management of the auction house that he would, as a gesture to the winning customer, offer this verification service for free. This was an offer that was considered perfectly normal in that arrogant, rich world. On the day of the auction, the hall was filled with an electric tension. Julian, in the crowd, holding his breath, was watching the sale of Lot 247. As expected, the bidding war was between Rousseau's proxy, a French diplomat, and the vulture's proxy, a Russian businessman. The figures reached astronomical levels, and finally, the hammer came down with the French diplomat's bid. Rousseau had won. On her face was a cold expression of satisfaction from closing a 20-year-old case. When Rousseau and her team took the bottle to that famous private lounge, Julian moved to start the final, most dangerous stage of his plan. With his special corkscrew set, which resembled a surgeon's tools, in his hand, he entered the lounge as the official sommelier. The room consisted of Rousseau, her two agents, and an official from the auction house.
Everyone's eyes were on that bottle on the table. Julian, first by accidentally knocking over a tray of other expensive wines carried by a waiter, created a calculated moment of chaos. In the brief confusion of broken bottles and spilled wine, the agent's attention was distracted for a moment. Julian used that split second to deftly cut the foil of the bottle. Then he approached the table. "With your permission, madam," he said to Rousseau, "I must check the condition of the cork and the authenticity of the seal. This is a vital procedure for this vintage." And then he performed that incredible sleight-of-hand trick. He placed his corkscrew in the cork. With the experience of years, he pulled the cork upward slowly, without making a single cracking sound. He continued to talk, drawing attention to his face and his voice. "As you can see, the elasticity and moisture content of the cork indicate a perfect 20-year storage condition," he was saying, when his left hand, under the table, out of sight, swapped the real, secret-filled cork in his right hand with the replica cork from his jacket pocket. It had all happened in less than a second. Then he placed that empty, innocent cork back into the mouth of the bottle. As a final touch, he slightly heated the fake wax in his pocket with a lighter, dripped it onto the mouth of the bottle, and with the secret seal on his ring, he re-stamped that minor imperfection on it. "Perfect," he said, stepping back. "The bottle is authentic in every detail. Congratulations." Rousseau, savoring her victory, took the bottle. The vulture, from far away, thinking that everything was over and he had lost, quietly left with his men. The game was over, and no one had understood what the real trick was. Julian slipped out of the lounge like a shadow in that confusion. In the cold night of London, on the bank of the River Thames, he held that small, priceless cork in his hand. Inside it was the secret that could once shake the world. He took out a lighter and set the cork on fire. The cork, along with the microfilm inside it, slowly burned and turned to ash. Julian scattered those ashes into the dark waters of the river. The identities of the Nightingale agents were safe forever. Rousseau had her priceless but now innocent bottle. The vulture was left empty-handed. And Julian, after 20 years, was truly free for the first time. Months later, we are back at that familiar vineyard in France. Julian is teaching a young apprentice how properly to cork, how to seal a bottle of his own wine. He says, "Remember, a perfect seal is not for hiding secrets, it is to protect what is valuable inside from the ravages of time and air. It is to allow it to age with grace, with honesty." He turns his eyes to the vineyards shining under the sun. On his face is the expression of peace, of tranquility he had lost 20 years ago. He had finally, properly, sealed his past and laid it to rest in the deepest corner of his cellar. Behind every genius there lies a secret, sometimes the source of that genius and sometimes the threat to destroy it. We will continue to uncover the untold stories and files of those who, like Julian Croft, built new lives to escape the echoes of their past, or of those who were crushed under those echoes. To not miss the secrets of these stolen pasts, don't forget to subscribe to Stolen Past Stories. Until we open another secret file, to explore another veil of secrecy.